Whether you're a high schooler studying for the SATs, a programmer having to code in Java, comedy trio The Lonely Island, or just anyone who's ever had to write anything ever, we all hate semicolons. Why do they even exist? Why do they look like that? Why is it called a semicolon? Wouldn't half a colon just be a period? And why does it take such a prominent spot on our keyboards? Taking a spot on the home row that could have gone to like O or something. And how do you even use it? To answer these questions, we need to go back in time to ancient Greece. You see, in modern times, we think of punctuation as serving a grammatical purpose. But this wasn't always the case. You see, most people couldn't read. So the few people who could would always have to read out loud. So scribes would include punctuation marks to let them know when to pause and for how long. There were three main marks. They were all dots: a low dot, a middle dot, and a high dot. The high dot meant the longest pause. It meant you would come to a full stop while speaking. Unsurprisingly, this is the ancestor of the modern day full stop, or as we call it in the United States, the period. For the Latin scribes copying the Greeks, the other two dots quickly fell out of fashion, since it can be pretty hard to tell at a glance the difference between a dot and a slightly raised dot. So they replaced them with our modern day comma and colon. But they also needed a new punctuation mark to represent a pause halfway between that of a comma and a colon. A semicolon, if you will. So they took the comma from the comma and the upper dot from the colon, and huzzah, semicolon. Nowadays, punctuation is used as more than just a pause. They have actual grammatical meaning. Periods are used for the end of a sentence. Commas are used to join an independent clause and a dependent clause. And semicolons, drumroll please, are used to join two related independent clauses. For those of you wondering, an independent clause is just a phrase that on its own can function as its own sentence. So, if you could replace your semicolon with a period and make two separate sentences, then it's a good semicolon. Of course, it's often just simpler to just use a period, or the classic comma and. This is without even mentioning the even weirder use of semicolons: lists. Everybody knows that you're supposed to use commas to separate different objects in a list. But what if the objects in your list already have commas? Then, apparently, you're supposed to use semicolons instead, which can get you monstrosities like this. Ugh, no wonder no one uses semicolons. But if no one uses semicolons, why did it get such a prominent spot on our keyboards? Well, for starters, we should acknowledge that QWERTY is not the only keyboard. On a more reasonable keyboard layout, like Dvorak, which deserves its own video on this channel, you can see that the semicolon has been shunted off to the corner where it belongs. You see, the point of Dvorak is efficiency. So all of the characters you type often are put all together, and all the weird useless ones are put off to the side. But the point of QWERTY is inefficiency. It was designed to make your typewriter not stick when you type too fast. So they just kind of did whatever. They put E off with the Q and W, and then they put the useless semicolon right on the home row. There was one group of people who discovered a use for the semicolon now prominently included in all of our computers: programmers. You see, back in the ancient language Algol, up there with Fortran and Lisp, commas were used to separate list elements, periods were used to signal the end of the program, and semicolons were used to separate individual statements. Algol was a super influential language, especially in its syntax, and a lot of other languages borrowed its idea of using semicolons. But instead of using them as statement separators, a lot of them use them as statement terminators. This is why, when you're coding in Java or C, you have to put a semicolon at the end of every single statement. And if you miss even one, the program doesn't compile, and you have to go search back through, and semicolons are stupid, and I hate them! Okay. I'm calm now. In my video about the ampersand, I talked a little bit about its many different varieties. So, let's take a little peek at what other languages use for semicolon. In Arabic, not content with just flipping from right to left, they also flip their semicolon upside down. In the Bamum scripts in modern-day Cameroon, they use this symbol. Interesting. In Greek, they use a symbol identical to our semicolon for their question mark. And for their semicolon, they still use a raised dot. But my personal favorite might have to be the Ethiopic semicolon. That is awesome. In fact, please go sign my petition to change the English semicolon and replace it with the Ethiopic semicolon. Or better yet, sign this petition to just get rid of the semicolon from English entirely. And while you're at it, make sure to go like this video and subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day!